My name is Monty Bruce. I'm representing myself, and well, I've been a detective for 5 years, and I have heard stories about many victims that are charged but never testified. And I believe I should be able to tell the courts what I've done in the past to get justice. I can tell you for a fact, 5 years ago, I was a school correctional officer, and I have handled cases that involve people under the title of disabled. I had to sit down for hours with kids under the title of handicapped, trying to find out who did what and why he, she witnessed it. I've brought in doctors, teachers, and parents so I can get the story right and not send the wrong person away. What I'm trying to say, senators and representatives, it shouldn't matter what it takes or what we have to do to get the truth and have justice. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Bruce. Committee, other questions? Representative Riskin.
Yes, thank you, and I appreciate you being here and spending your very valuable time. I'm a strong supporter of law enforcement. And I would absolutely support the right of law enforcement to be able to testify because there's credibility there. But don't you have concerns about some of these other people, and again, their propensity for bringing unfounded litigation?
Mr. Bruce.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. No comment.
Mr. Bruce, I have a question. As a detective, it's your testimony that you've actually investigated cases where a person with a developmental disability has allegedly been the victim of an assault, and have you had those people, those victims, make hearsay statements to you that you wished you could have provided to a court so that their perpetrator could be brought to justice?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I have. It's been a while. I can't remember the details correctly, but I have spent a lot of time with these kids, and they told me a lot throughout the time, but when it came down to the court, it's a closed mouth.
And so, Mr. Bruce, you were prevented from providing testimony about the hearsay statements that you heard from these victims because of our hearsay rules. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Thank you. Senator Aguilar.
So are you concerned that there are perpetrators out there that we did not prosecute that are still free in our community?
Mr. Bruce.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I am concerned about it, but as time goes and this law gets passed, we will find them.
Representative Riskin.
Yeah, I don't understand why, as a law enforcement officer, you were not allowed to testify, or was it that you were not allowed to testify, or that your testimony was not given credibility or weight or adequate weight by the jury or the judge?
Mr. Bruce.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. My credibility was not given.
I believe, Representative Riskin, that the hearsay rule of evidence prevented Mr. Bruce's testimony from being admitted in these cases. And that's the subject of the bill before us. Representative Riskin.
You can punch him anytime.
Thank you.
Mr. Bruce, thank you for being here and providing your testimony.
Thank you.
That's everyone on my list, unless Julia Jacobson is back.
They had to leave.
Okay, Julia had to leave. Is there anyone else in the audience who wishes to testify? Seeing none, public testimony is closed. Senator Hudak, would you like to give a wrap-up statement?
Thank you, Chairman. I would like to thank these special people who had the courage to come forward and tell you their stories, and for the professionals in this field who are doing God's work. I really feel that this piece of legislation will actually protect you from being falsely accused because of the way hearsay is applied in this piece of legislation. And we as a society, we have an obligation and a responsibility to help keep these people safe from the dangerous people out there that are there to exploit them. So I do encourage the passage of this piece of legislation, House Bill 12-1085.
Senator Hudak?
I'm going to actually be Julie Ferraro for just a moment, and I want to let you know that these people all worked in groups, and they were assigned pro and con, and we did that arbitrarily. And so some of the stories that you heard were very true. It was a great experience of PTSD for a lot of people, but then people also shared their stories and pulled them together. And so some people shared their own stories, some people shared other people's stories, and some people are actors. So thank you very much for your time and consideration.
Committee, is there any discussion of the bill before we proceed to vote? Senator Aguilar.
Thank you, Senator Hudak. And I was inclined to support this bill before we came to committee, but you brought forward such wonderful testifiers that I am a resounding yes. Thank you.
Representative Riskin.
Yeah, I have some serious concerns, and the two amendments I'd like to, can we
We'll
talk about amendments yet, or?
We'll get to that phase in just a moment. I thought if you had any other questions for the sponsor.
Just,
Very well
No.
then. Let's proceed. The bill's on the table for a motion.
I got a question.
Oh, Representative Ferrandino.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So I was looking, and you're saying how important this bill is, but you have a effective date of August 7th, and not a safety clause that would put it in immediately. If this is so important, why don't we have a safety clause on this?
Senator Hudak.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. We have this because in order to allow the court to take the time to allow this to be in place, we need to be able to give the system time to allow this new rule to be in place and law enforcement to understand that this is being implemented. I made that up.
Good job.
I almost believed it.
Let's go ahead and move to the action phase. The bill's on the table for a motion. Is there a motion on House Bill 1085? Senator Aguilar.
Yes, Mr. Chair, I move House Bill 1085. Is there a fiscal note?
No.
To the Committee of the Whole with a favorable recommendation.
Proper motion. Committee, are there amendments?
yes.
Representative Riskin.
Yes, I have two amendments. One is, I was looking on the website of, overlitigious.disabled.people.com, and I think
That's your own website.
I would like to have a clause on here, and I guess this might have to be a conceptual amendment that says that no disabled person can sue anyone and recover financial damages, and we cannot have any attorneys recover financial attorney's fees or any kind of attorney's fees as a result of this law, because I believe that there's a motivation that might be the motivation of some of these people. And then I also want to put in I do have language on this, that this on page 6 after line 2 at the very end, to just simply say this act shall not be applied against any employee of a sheltered workshop as defined in CRS 2710-206B or skilled nursing facility as defined in 25.5 502C, because I think we have an obligation to, as Senator Hudak said, to protect the people that are doing God's work and who, of course, would never harm any of these people. And so I just think that's very important, as do the lobbyists who, sorry, no.
So Representative Riskin, it sounds like you're trying to offer two different amendments to the bill, and if you
Yes.
please make a motion and let's take them one at a time. Representative Riskin.
Okay, I'll do the first motion on the one I have specific language on, which is, I think I've passed that out, and it's L001. And that's protecting the very deserving employees against what would clearly be false accusations.
Committee,
And I think we all know, we've all talked to their lobbyists, and we know that they don't do those kinds of things, so.
Senator Aguilar.
Yes, Mr. Chair, I object to that amendment. Obviously, I'm concerned that this is the group that we, in some ways, are trying to protect these people against.
Representative Ferrandino.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and Representative Riskin. While I appreciate what you're trying to do with this amendment, I also have to object. I still have concerns with this bill, and I think we can work on amendments to try and deal with those concerns. But I think the two amendments you're proposing go way too far and really gut the intent of the bill. And I think there's some good things in this bill that we should try to move along, but there are some parameters we need to put around it.
And Representative Riskin, I'll also be opposing the amendment. I don't think there's anything special about someone who works in the capacity of a caregiver in a facility that makes them incapable of perpetrating abuse against a vulnerable person. And in fact, unfortunately, some of the cases that we do see exactly are that fact pattern, and for that reason, I'll be a no. There is objection to the amendment, so we'll call roll. Representative Riskin?
Aye.
Senator Aguilar?
No.
Representative Ferrandino?
No.
Mr. Chairman? No. The amendment fails 3-1. You have another amendment, Representative Riskin.
Yes, I would just like to make sure that this stays in the criminal realm and have a prohibition against civil litigation from anyone, on behalf of anyone who is protected under this act, as well as a absolute prohibition against attorneys' fees for those disability attorneys that go around suing everyone.
Committee, is the conceptual amendment clear? Representative Ferrandino?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I would move a substitute amendment.
We don't do that in the Senate.
You don't do substitute amendments in the Senate? This is why the Senate is so boring and not as fun. Okay, forget that then. I just oppose the amendment.
Other discussion? I also would register my opposition to the amendment. The idea that in the name of protecting vulnerable persons, we would strip them of their civil rights to recover damages in our courts of law is something I find rather shocking, and I'll be a no vote. There is opposition to the amendment, so we'll take roll. Representative Riskin?
Aye.
Senator Aguilar?
No.
Representative Ferrandino?
No.
Mr. Chairman? No. That amendment fails 3-1. Committee, are there other amendments? Senator Aguilar?
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and I, based on Representative Ferrandino's comments, I would move that we strike page 6, lines 3 to 12, and insert a safety clause.
That's a conceptual amendment. Committee, is a conceptual amendment clear? Are there questions? Senator Aguilar has moved that we include a safety clause rather than the referendum clause, that the bill will take effect sooner. Is there opposition to the amendment? There is opposition, so we'll take the roll. Representative Riskin?
No.
Senator Aguilar?
Aye.
Representative Ferrandino?
No.
Mr. Chairman? Aye. That motion fails on a tie vote of 2-2. Are there further amendments? Seeing none, Senator Aguilar has moved the bill to the Committee of the Whole. Roll call. Representative Riskin?
No.
Senator Aguilar?
Aye.
Representative Ferrandino?
For now, yes.
And the chair votes aye. That motion passes 3-1. Congratulations, Senator Hudak.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Folks, that's really how it goes. We went through